I sent one email, 5 paragraphs, 3 attachments, 1 recipient. 27 minutes later, it landed in the inbox of every single person in that building. All 200 of them. My name is Lauren Cassidy. I'm 31 years old, and I spent 6 months building a project that would have been the defining work of my career. And then I spent 3 weeks in a hospital while the people I worked with put their names on it. I want to tell you what I came back to, what I found, what I had already prepared for finding, and what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in November, when the CEO of Hartwell & Great Consulting forwarded my email to the entire company with a single sentence above it. Drop your city below and stay with me. This one has been waiting. I need to start with the project, because you need to understand what it was before you can understand what they took. My name for it internally was Meridian. Formally, it was the Kellner Retail Group Market Expansion Analysis, a comprehensive competitive landscape study, consumer behavior model, and 3-year growth strategy for a mid-sized retail client the firm had been trying to retain for 2 years. Kellner had been considering walking. They were paying us $280,000 annually in consulting fees, and they hadn't seen work that justified it in 18 months. My director, a man named Patrick Howe, assigned Meridian to me in February. He told me it was mine. He told me the client relationship depended on it. He told me to make it something they couldn't walk away from. I spent 4 months building it, not because I had to, because I knew exactly what it could be. I'll tell you what Meridian was. It was a 94-page strategic document with 11 proprietary data models, a consumer segmentation framework I built from scratch using 3 years of publicly available behavioral research, a competitive benchmarking analysis covering 26 market competitors, and a 5-year revenue projection tool the client could update themselves. I had built the projection tool in Excel with macros I wrote myself on weeknights. I had color-coded the frameworks in the client's brand palette. I had put a cover page on it with their logo centered and a quote from their founder underneath. I had spent 340 hours on Meridian. I know because I tracked every hour in a spreadsheet I kept in my personal Google Drive. And before I left for the hospital, I had timestamped and saved every single version of every single document. The illness came in June. I won't give you all of it, because some of it is still mine to carry privately. What I'll tell you is this. It was a uterine fibroid that had been growing for 2 years and that had been manageable until it wasn't. I collapsed at my desk on a Wednesday morning. An ambulance came. Surgery was scheduled within 4 days. I was in the hospital for 11 days. I was on leave for 3 weeks total. Before I went in, the evening before my surgery, in fact, lying in a pre-op bed with an IV in my arm, I did something I want to tell you about. I had already been emailing myself versions of Meridian throughout the project. Every major iteration saved to my personal Gmail with the subject line Meridian plus the version number and date. I had done this out of habit, out of the kind of professional paranoia that women develop early in competitive environments. That evening, I forwarded myself the complete final package. The 94-page document, the Excel model with the macros, the appendix, the source data files, the slide deck, 17 slides I built as a presentation companion. All of it with the file metadata visible, showing creation dates going back to February. Then I forwarded one more thing, an email chain, a thread that went back 6 weeks, between me and Patrick, in which I had been providing project updates. In that chain were 14 messages. Every one of them had Patrick saying variations of, "Good progress. Keep building. This is your project, Lauren." The phrase, "your project," appeared 7 times across the chain. I lay in that pre-op bed and thought, I hope I don't need any of this. Then they came to give me the anesthetic, and I stopped thinking about Meridian. The surgery went well. Recovery was harder than I expected. Not medically, but in the specific way that forced stillness is hard for people who are accustomed to being useful. I slept a lot. My friend Petra brought me soup twice a week and sat with me and didn't require me to be interesting. By week 2, I was online enough to check email. What I found on a Tuesday afternoon of my second week of leave was a calendar invitation. It was for a meeting called Countergroup, Meridian Presentation, Final Delivery, scheduled for Thursday of that week. The presenting parties listed on the invitation were Patrick Howell, Marcus Reed, and Sophie Chen. My name was not on it. Marcus Reed was a senior analyst who sat 2 desks from me and who had, over the course of the Meridian project, asked me twice how the consumer segmentation model worked. I had explained it to him both times. He had taken notes. Sophie Chen was an account manager who had been copied on one project update email in March and had replied, "Great work," with 2 exclamation points. I stared at the calendar invitation on my laptop screen. From my sofa, where I was wearing pajamas and had a heating pad on my abdomen. I read it 3 more times. Then I opened a new document. I want to tell you something about the specific feeling of discovering a betrayal when you are physically recovering from surgery. There is a particular vulnerability to it that is unlike any other context. You are already operating from a position of reduced capacity. Your body has been through something and is still finding its way back. And in that state, something in you wants to make the discovery smaller than it is, wants to find an explanation that doesn't require the thing to be what it clearly is. I sat with it for most of that Tuesday. I looked up the Kellner presentation on Thursday on the company's internal project management system, which I could still access from home. I found the presentation file. It was titled Kellner Retail Group, Growth Strategy, Hartwell and Gray, June 2024. I opened it. Slide 1, the Hartwell and Gray logo. Client name, date, Kellner Retail Group. 3-year market expansion strategy. Slide 3, prepared by Patrick Howell, Marcus Reed, Sophie Chen. Slides 4 through 17, my work. Every framework, every model, every visual. My color coding, my font choices, my footnotes. The projection tool summary I had condensed into 2 slides. The consumer segmentation framework with the segment names I had created. I had called them anchored loyalists, emerging switchers, and value opportunists because I had spent 2 days on the naming and I liked how it sounded. My work, my 340 hours, my words. 3 names at the top, none of them mine. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table with it, and I decided very deliberately not to be emotional about what happened next. Not because I wasn't emotional. I was. I'm human. I had spent 4 months on Meridian. I had built frameworks from scratch. I had spent evenings and a Saturday morning writing Excel macros because I wanted the projection tool to be something the client would actually use. The anger was real, and it was significant, but I had learned something over years in competitive environments that I want to share with you. Emotion is information. Evidence is leverage. I had the evidence. I had been building it without knowing I would need it since February. Now I needed to organize it. Over the following 4 days, still on leave, still recovering, moving slowly around my apartment with a heating pad, I built what I came to call the attribution file. Here is what it contained. The email trail, 14 messages between me and Patrick going back to February, with his own words referring to Meridian as your project 7 times. Printed and flagged, every time-stamped version of the Meridian document from the company's internal system, showing my name as the sole author on every draft from version 1.0 through version 9.3. The final version, 9.3, had a last modified timestamp of June 3rd. My surgery was June 5th. Patrick, Marcus, and Sophie's names appeared on the document for the first time in version 9.4, created June 11th, 6 days into my leave. The personal email archive. 14 forwarded versions of Meridian documents sent to my personal Gmail, timestamped and dated, with the original file metadata preserved. The hour log, my personal spreadsheet tracking 340 hours of work, date by date, in Google Sheets. The spreadsheet had been created in February and had 97 individual entries. The calendar invitation, saved as a PDF with the presenting parties and my omission clearly visible. On the Monday of my second week of leave, 3 days before the Kellner presentation, I had received a direct message on Teams from Sophie Chen. It said, "Hey Lauren, hope you're recovering well. Quick question about the segmentation model. What did you name the third consumer group again?" She couldn't remember the name of a segment in a framework she was about to present as her own work. She had asked me. I had not replied. I had taken a screenshot instead. The Kellner presentation was Thursday. On Friday afternoon, I received an email from Patrick that said, "Lauren, great news. Kellner loved the presentation. They've confirmed renewal. Exciting win for the team. Get well soon." Exciting win for the team. I read it once. I filed it in the attribution folder. I returned to work on a Monday morning 2 weeks later. I want to describe that Monday for you because the details matter. I wore the blazer I wore when I needed to feel like a version of myself that had all the information. I brought a coffee from the place across the street, not the office machine. Patrick saw me from across the open floor. He came over. "Lauren, great to have you back. You look well." "Thank you," I said. "Big news while you were out. Kellner renewed. Whole team stepped up." "I heard," I said. "Congratulations to everyone." He looked at me for a moment, just a flicker of something, and then smiled and walked back to his office. Marcus nodded at me from his desk. Sophie waved. I sat down. I turned on my computer. I opened the attribution file, and I spent the rest of the morning doing absolutely nothing except my normal work, while the file sat in a folder on my desktop named, very simply, Tuesday. I had chosen Tuesday deliberately. Not Monday, too soon, too obvious, too easy to read as reactive. Not Wednesday or later. I didn't want to sit with it longer than I had to. Tuesday gave me 1 day to be back. 1 day to be seen. 1 day to let them believe that nothing was coming. I arrived Tuesday at the same time. Coffee, blazer, same seat. At 11:47, I opened my email. I addressed it to one person, Diana Marsh, Chief Executive Officer, Cartwell & Gray Consulting. I had done my research on Diana. She had built the firm from 14 people to 200. She was known in the specific way that leaders become known inside companies as someone who valued 2 things above all else: client relationships and intellectual integrity. There was a framed quote on the wall outside her corner office. I had walked past it 100 times that said, "Our work is only worth what it actually is." I wrote to her as if I were writing to exactly that person. The email was 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph identified the project, Meridian, the Kellner Retail Group analysis, and noted the client's renewal confirmation following the June presentation. The second paragraph stated, plainly, that the work presented had been produced entirely by me beginning in February, and that I had been on medical leave when it was presented under 3 other names without my knowledge or consent. The third paragraph contained 3 inline attachments: the version history excerpt showing my sole authorship through version 9.3, 3 representative emails from Patrick using the phrase, "your project," and the team's message from Sophie asking me to remind her of the segment name. The fourth paragraph noted that I had a complete attribution file available upon request. containing 47 items of documentation, including the full email chain, my personal version archive, and a 340-hour work log. The 5th paragraph said this: I am not raising this to cause disruption. I am raising it because the work that retained this client was mine, and the people in this company who will work on future projects deserve to know that their contributions will be attributed correctly. I trust you will know what to do with this. I read it twice. I pressed send. Then I picked up my coffee, and I looked out the window at the street below, and I waited. 27 minutes. That was how long it took. At 12:14, my inbox received a new message. The sender was Diana Marsh. The subject line was the same as mine: R.E. Kellner Group, Meridian Project Attribution. The body of the email contained one sentence above a full forward of everything I had sent her. Team, I want to make sure everyone sees this. That was it, that single sentence. And below it, my 5 paragraphs, my 3 attachments, the version history, Patrick's emails, Sophie's Teams message asking me to remind her of the name of a segment she had presented to a client as her own. 200 people. I didn't watch the floor react in real time. I'm going to be honest about that. I had anticipated the email going somewhere, to HR, to Patrick's manager, to a small group. Not to all staff simultaneously. That was Diana's choice entirely, and it was not one I had planned for. What I knew was happening was this. Across a floor of 200 people, 200 email notifications were arriving. 200 people were reading the same 5 paragraphs. 200 people were opening the same 3 attachments. The floor was not loud when I walked out to refill my coffee. It was very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that has a sound to it. The sound of 200 people doing the same thing at the same time, which is reading something and understanding what it means. Marcus Reed was at his desk. His screen was facing me as I walked past. I could see the email open. I could see his face. I refilled my coffee. I walked back to my desk. Patrick Howe, Marcus Reed, and Sophie Chen were called into separate meetings with HR that afternoon. I know this because I was also called in, first at 2 o'clock. And the HR director, a woman named Carol Webb, was precise and thorough and clearly had read every item in the attribution file Diana had forwarded to her within 15 minutes of the all-staff email. Carol asked me to walk her through the version history. I did. She asked about the Teams message. I showed her the original screenshot. She asked if I had any documentation of Patrick directing me to work on the project exclusively. I forwarded her the email chain from my personal archive. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. As I was leaving, I passed Patrick in the hallway outside the HR suite. He was waiting to go in. He looked at me with an expression I had no vocabulary for at the time. I've thought about it since. It wasn't Banger exactly. It was the expression of a man who had made a calculation, a very confident calculation, and had just found out every number was wrong. I nodded. I went back to my desk. I worked until 5:30. I went home. What happened in the following 3 weeks was, in many ways, procedural. Patrick Howe was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The investigation, conducted by an external HR consultancy at Diana's instruction, reviewed the version history, the email chain, the Teams message, and 17 additional documents identified by Carol's team. The investigation found that Patrick had directed Marcus and Sophie to reformat the Meridian presentation under their names without informing me or obtaining my consent. He had done so on the assumption, stated apparently in a message to Marcus that was surfaced by the investigation, that I would not be in a position to make an issue of it, given my medical situation. Patrick Howe's employment at Hartwell & Gray was terminated effective November 14th. Marcus Reed received a formal written warning and was removed from client-facing work for 6 months. He also issued a written apology to me through HR, The apology was 3 sentences long and contained the phrase, "I didn't fully think through the implications." I filed it without reading it more than once. Sophie Chen was given a written warning. She had been the most peripheral. The team's message, her inadvertent confirmation that she hadn't built what she was presenting, worked in her favor. She came to my desk 3 days after the all-staff email. She said, "I should have said something." I told her that was correct. We haven't spoken much since. The Kellner account was transferred to a new team. Their account manager sent Diana a note that said they were glad the firm had handled it transparently, and that the work, the actual work, had been exceptional. That note made its way to me. Diana sent it personally. I want to tell you about Diana Marsh, because I think the thing I underestimated when I sent that email was what kind of person she would be. I had expected process. I had expected the email to trigger something institutional, an investigation, a quiet resolution, a correction somewhere in the record. I had not expected a single sentence forwarded to 200 people at 12:14 on a Tuesday afternoon. Diana stopped by my desk on the Wednesday, the day after the all-staff forward. She pulled a chair from an empty desk nearby and sat down in a way that said this was going to be a real conversation, not a corporate one. She said, "Why did you wait until Tuesday?" I told her the truth, that I needed 1 day back before I acted, that I wanted to be seen first as someone who had returned, not just someone who was making a complaint. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "The segmentation framework, the anchored loyalists, emerging switchers, value opportunists framework. The Kellner team specifically mentioned it in their renewal letter. They said it was the most useful tool they'd been given in 2 years of consulting." I didn't say anything. "I want you to know," she said, "that I know whose work that was. And I want you to know that that matters to me." She stood up. She pushed the chair back. "Take the afternoon if you need it," she said. "You've been through a lot." I didn't take the afternoon, but I thought about that conversation for a long time. I was promoted to senior analyst in January. The Kellner account, the account that Meridian had retained, was assigned to me as lead. I presented the quarterly update to their executive team in March, with my name on the cover slide and my frameworks in the deck, and 3 months of new additions I had built since returning. Their CEO shook my hand at the end and said the model I had built had changed how they were thinking about their Eastern expansion. I thought about the pre-op bed, the IV, the laptop balanced on my knees, forwarding files to myself at 11 p.m. before surgery. I had hoped I wouldn't need any of it. I was glad I had it anyway. There's something I want to say about the illness before I end. I don't tell this story primarily as a workplace story. I tell it as a story about what happens when you are vulnerable, genuinely, medically vulnerable, and the people around you choose to use that vulnerability as an opening. The surgery gave them what they thought was a window. The window was real. What they didn't know was what was on the other side of it. I have thought about whether I would do anything differently, whether I should have spoken up the moment I saw the calendar invitation, whether waiting was the right choice. I've talked it through with Petra, with a therapist I started seeing after the surgery, with myself on quiet evenings. What I keep coming back to is this. The documentation wasn't a weapon I built for revenge. It was a record I kept because I believed my work was worth documenting. I kept it the same way I tracked my hours, not because I expected to meet it, but because precision is a form of self-respect. The email to Diana was 5 paragraphs. It told the truth. The truth did the rest. If you're in a job where your work is being used without your name on it, where people present your ideas in rooms you're not in, I want you to hear this. Timestamp your files. Keep your version history. Forward yourself the email chains where people say, "This is your project." Keep a work log. Write it down for the record, because the record tells the truth when you need it to. That's my story. If it stayed with you, share it. Subscribe if you haven't. And tell me in the comments, has someone ever taken credit for something you built? I read every single one.